Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Welcome to the Corner of Truth and Courage. You're listening to Fortress of Faith. This is Tom Wallace. Well, folks, I have pre-recorded today's broadcast. Currently, I'm in the Middle East on a mission trip, and when I get back next month, I'll be glad to share with each and every one of you with what's going on. There's some exciting developments going on in the Middle East. I'm anxious to come back and tell you about all those things. And today, for this week, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be covering material that I shared with a conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. We don't think of Charlotte, North Carolina as a very large Muslim populated state. The largest would be New York, especially with New York City, 500,000 Muslims in New York City. In Philadelphia, which we're now on the air, 300,000 Muslims there in that area. Texas used to be the second largest populated state, but they've dropped to fourth place, and Florida has moved into second place. Of course, Chicago and other places, L.A. and a lot of Muslims up in Washington State, of course, around Seattle and the metro areas there. But back down in Texas, where we're also on the air now, we have a large population, about 100,000 Muslims in the metro area. It's a loose number. We're still waiting for better sources on that number, but certainly you drive around the area and you see a lot of mosques. But in North Carolina, we have about 24 to 30,000 Muslims in North Carolina. I have family out here in that area. And Charlotte has about 10,000 Muslims. Raleigh-Durham is another hot spot with about 15,000. And I want to get into some of the information that I shared with the pastors. And by the way, if you're listening to our broadcast and you are a pastor or a leader in a church and are interested in me coming out and to speak on the subjects of biblical understanding of Islam. I call it an unveiling of Islam conference that we do. We'll also get into how do we, speak to Muslims about Christ? How do we share our faith with them? If we're to resist Islam, how do we do that in the right way? Because there's definitely a wrong way, okay? So I hope you'll stay with us in the broadcast. Before I get into that, let me announce to you that we have our Bible Land tour coming up in November. And we're limited to 30 seats. And these will probably go fast because of the price. We've got an amazing price. A lot of people go to Israel on a Bible Land tour. Definitely. It's it's a must. However, there's more in our Bible that's outside of Israel than actually what's inside. For example, the 7 churches of Revelation on the western part of Turkey. The western part of Turkey is very much like Europe. If you've ever lived and been to Europe, you'll be surprised how a Muslim country feels like Europe, really. So we'll fly into Istanbul, we'll tour Istanbul, and that city is amazing just in itself. And then we'll go down to the 7 churches, make our way around the circuit there, and we'll be in Pergamos and Smyrna and Sardis and Thyatira, Philadelphia, and of course Laodicea, and the jewel of the trip will be Ephesus. And but we'll also pick up a couple other places there, like Colossae, where the book of Colossians was written to, and just up on the hill is Hierapolis, and amazing things to see that are there. And the cost is under $3,500. Yep, that's not a fault. You heard me correctly, under $3,500. Most of these trips are going to be about $5,000 or so. And but we have a great arrangement with a tour agency, and we would love for you to come along with us there. So go to our website, fortressoffaith.com. fortressoffaith.com or .org is the same website. And we have both the URLs for that. And you'll find information on our website there. Click on the PDF, download that, fill out the information, and we'll chat with you about the trip and hope you can come along. All right, well, let's get into it here. Now, again, Charlotte, North Carolina, there's about 1,000 Muslim students in the university in Mecklenburg County there in Charlotte itself. And, of course, Mecklenburg County boasts to be the home of 25,000 Muslims. Now, that's coming from them. That's their numbers. I think they inflated that. Our records show about 10,000 Muslims in the Charlotte area, in the metro area there. But there's a van going around that has been plastered, when they put this vinyl all around the van. It looks really neat. I've seen it. And there's pictures of the website of it there, American Islamic Outreach Foundation. And they're doing dawah openly in Charlotte. What is dawah? Dawah would be the word for evangelism. They're trying to convert Christians to become Muslims. On the van, it says in bold words, many prophets, one message. So suggesting, well, we can accept Jesus and Moses and all of them as a prophet, and Muhammad, of course, and they all have the same message. Muslims always start with that. They always approach Christians and they say, well, don't you know that we have the same God? My response to that is, well, wonderful. That's great. So then your God has a son. And they get a kind of an ugly, confused look on their face like, no, Allah hath no son. Then we don't have the same God, because my God has a begotten son and his name is Jesus Christ. And if your God has no son, then we clearly do not have the same God. We should never give ground to that. But that one statement that we have the same God, Christians and Muslims worship the same God. And because Christians are unfamiliar with Islam, they kind of get pushed on their heels there on that, and then they start listening and giving ground to them. In Charlotte, they have an Islamic academy, and I think they're up to about 400 students there. It's a big, beautiful place, in a very expensive area, actually. And so there's definitely a presence of Muslims in the city and growing in North Carolina. But you'll be surprised at the number of Muslims. Back when ISIS was, a big deal, we had President Obama in the White House. We had a number of arrests. Thank you for our intelligence services. I'm so grateful for the work that they do, even when their hands were being tied. They arrested a number of people who were trying to join ISIS or giving aid to ISIS. Jordan and Brown, both from Raleigh, North Carolina, were arrested. Then we had 7 charged with supporting, and oddly enough, the majority of them were white Muslims. American-born, growing up over here, but nevertheless, were giving support to ISIS. One of those boys, I met his parents. His name's Justin Sullivan. He was 16 years of age, and he wanted to kill 1,000 Americans on July the 4th for ISIS. So he got his dad's hunting rifle there, and he was practicing and shot his neighbor dad before the attack. He got arrested, of course, and wasn't able to carry out his great jihad mission there, but I was trying to make ties to meet with that boy, but that never happened. But I tell you what, we think sometimes that Muslims in our community are benign and not a threat, and for the most part, they are. They really are. The problem really isn't with the Muslim. The problem is with with Islam, and I say this often. Anytime you deal with this subject, you have to address it in 2 different departments. You have to separate Muslim from Islam. Islam is an ideology. It is a religion, an ideology of a man named Muhammad, who in the 7th century proclaimed himself as a prophet and preached a lot of things that were similar to our Bible. He knew, from Christians and Jews that were in his life about their religions. And so he kind of added those stories, those Bible stories, into his message, but added and changed a few things. And therefore we have Islam. But Muhammad was not just building a religion, he was building a kingdom, an empire. He wanted to take over the world. And he used the sword. He really did. And he commanded the faithful to do so. And so those who listen to the moderate version, what I call the Reformed version, the version that the Ottoman Empire spread, they're going to leave the sword in the 7th century with Muhammad and say it only belongs there. Only rarely under extreme situations do we bring it to today. And for that part, about 99% of the Muslims in the world follow that form of thinking. But that's not what Muhammad taught. Muhammad taught the sword was for all time. As long as there's unbelievers, then we take the sword with us. So let me give you a quick overview of Islam as we go through this week. I'm just looking at the clock and thinking, oh boy, I got a lot to cover. Now, you need to realize that, they see their God. If I can pull us away like a 40,000-foot view and look down, they believe that God, Allah, created Adam and Eve. And there's a few different things. Original sin happened in heaven, and they threw them out and on the moon rock, and they landed there in Mecca. Actually, that's where they believe that Adam and Eve is the birthplace of the world. But they believe that God made a covenant with Abraham, and he revealed his message through the seed of Abraham. Of course, the two sons of Abraham were Ishmael and Isaac. But he starts with Isaac, and he gives the Jews the message, but the Jews corrupt it. And so Allah has to find a new prophet, and he now finds Jesus, who's a seed of Abraham, and he gives him the message, but then the Christians corrupt it and twist it. And so then Allah has to fix that. And so he goes to find a new prophet about 600 years after Christ. And he's not going to go through the Jews anymore. He's going to go through Ishmael, another seed of Abraham. And he finds Muhammad and gives him the last testament. So in the eyes of Islam, they believe that God gave us the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament, but corruption crept in. And we can't trust it. And we know what is corrupted by what God gave as truth, being the Quran. This is how they talk. And so what's in the Quran is faithful. You don't have to go to the Old anymore. God gave us the last testament. So you have the Old Testament, New Testament, and last testament. Very similar to the Mormons, isn't it? If you're familiar with that. Prophet claims, I got a message from God. I'm his prophet, and I've got the printing, the plates, and all that. A lot of similarities, multiple marriages and celestial marriages, and a lot of things very similar between Islam and Mormonism. But there's a whole lot more to cut into this subject. But when we come back tomorrow, we'll get into some of the apologetics and polemics. The apologist is the one making a defense. Imagine a courtroom. You got a defense team. Then you got the polemist. They're making a prosecution. They're making a case against error. So we'll get into that in tomorrow's broadcast. I hope you'll join us again at the corner of truth and courage. Now go out and be salt and light.